Lally's game. Selena never worried about pulling the shade over the window above the tub. Their property was secluded and private. No one was around. Selena waited until the tub was half full. Then she dropped her robe and started to pull off her nightshirt. When it was almost over her head, she froze. She yanked the nightshirt back down. Someone was watching her. She was sure of it. Selena leaned toward the window and scanned the backyard. She squinted and looked toward the trees. Her gaze shot from one tree to the next. She didn't see anyone. Selena frowned, even more rattled now than she had been before. She reached out and pulled the shade. Then she turned and closed the bathroom door. Selena's bath wasn't as relaxing as she hoped it would be. In fact, it was almost torturous. She tried several times to lean back and close her eyes, but she was too much on the alert. She kept thinking she could hear sounds coming from another part of the house. Once she was sure, she heard a creak in the attic overhead. Twice, she thought she heard footsteps on the stairs. Finally, after just 15 minutes, Selena gave up. She got out of the tub, drained it, and quickly put her robe on. Hurrying back to the bedroom, she dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. Then she went through the entire house, making sure she was alone. Selena checked every room and every closet. She even looked inside the awful trunk, which was now back in the rear of the closet in the third bedroom. It was still empty. After she assured herself that she was alone, Selena tried to work. It didn't do any good. She couldn't focus. She kept hearing sounds in the house. Once, when the refrigerator's compressor kicked on, she practically leaped out of her chair. Work wasn't working. She was a knot of nerves. Selena abandoned her office. She grabbed her purse, went out to the pickup, and drove out of town. She spent the afternoon antiquing, coming home with a vintage skirt, an antique hall table, and a pair of 100-year-old pewter candle holders. She tried to tell herself she imagined everything that had happened the night before and that morning. Over the next 2 weeks, though, it became abundantly clear that Selena hadn't imagined anything. She really was being watched. Either that or she was losing her mind. No matter what Selena did when she was at home, she felt tingles between her shoulder blades. She could actually feel someone's or something's gaze boring into her. It wasn't just when she was alone either. It happened when Cade was around, during the evenings and on the weekends too. After just a week of the unrelenting sensation of being observed constantly, Selena, lying awake during the night, decided that the cursory searches she'd done through the house, looking into every room and closet, weren't thorough enough. Selena's dad's wedding advice burbled up and nudged at her. Trust your instincts. Her instincts told her that she needed to look in every nook and cranny of her house. When Cade left for work the next day, Selena made sure the house was locked up tight so nothing and no one could enter while she searched. Then she went through every tiny space in the house. She opened every cabinet and every drawer. She looked under every piece of furniture. She looked behind anything and everything that had more than an inch of space behind it. In the middle of this search, though, in her bedroom, Selena stopped and sat down on the floor. She dropped her head into her hands. Who was she kidding? She wasn't being watched electronically. Not only was that totally unrealistic, it didn't fit the facts. Selena got off the floor. She went down to her office and closed the door behind her. She pulled the shade. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She brought up a new document. At the top of it, she typed facts. Then she typed the facts as she knew them. 1. Lally was a robot that really existed. 2. Lally went missing from Freddy's Pizzaplex. 3. Cade saw Lally after it, not he. Selena refused to refer to Lally as he. Went missing. 4. Cade thought he trapped Lally in the trunk. 5. Cade kept the trunk with him, locked up from that point on. 6. Selena unlocked the trunk. 7. When Cade opened the trunk, it was empty. 8. Selena saw Lally in the garage. Selena had taken a symbolic logic class in college. It had been an elective, chosen as a lark. But what she learned came in handy now. She ran her facts through a logic equation and came up with 2 possible conclusions. Neither of them made her happy. One logical conclusion, based on the facts, was that Lally was real. And although not as easily proven, the corollary to this conclusion was that Lally was watching Selena. This conclusion, however, was so insane, logical or not, that it led to the other possible conclusion. Selena was losing her mind. Figuring they would help her in the business world, Selena had taken several psychology courses in college. In one of the courses, they studied paranoia. Paranoid people, suffering from delusions, were always convinced their conclusions were logical. The problem, however, was that their conclusions were based on logical fallacies. Selena went back over her list of facts. Was she really sure they were facts? Or was she grasping at logic to cover up the real fact that she was becoming paranoid and delusional? Selena deleted the document and closed her laptop. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't stay in this house another second. Selena left her office, ignoring the immediate awareness of being observed as she walked into the kitchen. She grabbed her purse and went out to the pickup. As she backed out of the garage, she realized where she needed to go. "Well, hello, dear," Janice said when she opened her door and saw Selena standing on the front porch. "I'm sorry I didn't call first," but Janice waved away Selena's words. "What did I tell you about calling and about knocking on the door? My home is your home. You can come and go as you please." Janice had given Selena a key to her house the day Selena and Cade married, and she had indeed told Selena to treat Janice's house as her own. Selena, however, hadn't been able to bring herself to do that. Besides, she was afraid that if she did so, Janice would assume the open door policy was reciprocal. Selena loved Janice, but she didn't want her mother-in-law dropping in unannounced. Janice, who was wearing a ruffled pastel pink apron over yellow polyester pants and a yellow and green floral patterned blouse, led Selena through the living room and into her large old-fashioned kitchen. Janice's leather flats tapped on the yellow and blue linoleum floor. In the kitchen, Selena inhaled deeply. The room smelled like butter and cinnamon and sugar. The scent was enticing. It almost made her forget why she was here. Janice gestured at the baking ingredients and pans scattered across her yellow Formica countertops. "I was just whipping up a batch of my raised cinnamon rolls for the ladies' club," Janice said. "Would you like to help?" "I'd love to," Selena said honestly. Maybe making cinnamon rolls was a better idea than having the conversation she wanted to have. Baking usually relaxed Selena. She hoped it would do so today. Selena went into the pantry and plucked a simple blue apron, no ruffles, from the back of the pantry door. Janice had given the apron to Selena to use when they cooked together. "Frills just don't suit you, dear. You're far too beautiful to hide those elegant curves under flounces." For the next hour, Selena and Janice spread out dough and sprinkled it with butter, cinnamon, and sugar. Then they rolled up the dough and cut it into classic cinnamon roll pinwheels. After the rolls were in the oven, Janice put water on for tea. "Your usual peach spice, dear?" "Do you have any chamomile?" Selena asked. "Oh my," Janice said. "Do you need a de-stressor?" "You could say that." Janice didn't ask why Selena needed a de-stressor. Selena liked that about Janice. She never pried. Janice made the tea, and she and Selena sat at Janice's round kitchen table. Selena toyed with a pale blue and yellow plaid placemat as she let Janice chatter about her bridge club for a few minutes. But then Selena decided the conversation she came to have couldn't be put off any longer. "Speaking of games," Selena said in what she knew was a pathetic segue, "what was it that Cade liked so much about Lally's game?" Janice didn't seem to mind the abrupt subject change. "Why, I'm not sure." She took a sip of tea. "It's funny you ask. That's something I did wonder at the time. At first I thought it was the colors in the arena. He has never liked my softer color palette." Selena thought about the rich burgundies, dark greens, and deep blues that Cade liked to wear with his ubiquitous khakis. She nodded. "But I decided that wasn't right. I think what it was..." Janice leaned back in her chair. "The game made him feel special, because the game was just for two, and Lally was a robot. I think Cade felt like he was a chosen child or something. Now, heaven only knows why he needed that feeling. As an only child, he got nothing but tons of attention from me and his dad, until his dad passed, of course. Rest his soul." She shook her head. "But maybe that was a part of it. He was an only child. Maybe he wanted a brother. Maybe Lally was like a brother to him. I'm not really sure. I do know that Cade didn't want to share Lally with anyone." "What do you mean?" Selena asked. "Oh, I'm just remembering how upset Cade got one day when another little boy, a boy he knew from school named Daniel, snuck into the game. My oh my, was Cade angry. He was furious. His little face was all screwed up and red when he got home that day. 'The game is only for two,' he said to me over and over. You would have thought that Daniel had done something unforgivably egregious instead of just a relatively benign action of sneaking into Lally's game with Cade," Janice sighed. "Daniel was a sweet little boy, adorable, freckles across his nose. I knew his mother. It was so tragic that he died in a horrible accident." Selena set down her teacup so fast it rattled in the saucer. Janice didn't notice. "What accident?" Selena asked. Janice got up and walked over to the oven. She turned on the oven light and bent over to look through the glass window set in the oven door. "Oh, they're rising nicely. You're really getting the hang of netting, dear. An accident? Selena tried to get Janice back on track. Janice acted like she didn't hear the question. Maybe she didn't. Selena had noticed that Janice tended to drift in and out of conversations at will, as if sometimes she had better things to think about than whatever was being talked about. Selena tried a different question. Why did Cade like Lally so much? I think Lally is kind of scary looking, Janice supplied. Selena raised her eyebrows. Yeah, I tend to agree, Janice said. But then, little boys are odd creatures. Cade also liked snails and slugs when he was small. He was always poking at them with sticks. Not to hurt them, mind you. He just wanted to see what they do. He thought they were fascinating. Selena smiled at the image of Cade poking at a slug. Then her mind replaced the image of Cade and the slug with one of Lally. Selena shivered. How did Lally work exactly? Selena asked. Was it programmed to run and hide? Or to sneak up on the kids? Or what? Selena wanted to understand how the robot could be doing what it was doing at her house. She was nearly 100% sure now that Lally was her stalker. Oh no, nothing like that, dear, Janice said. Lally didn't move. The kids had to carry him around and hide him themselves. Seemed somewhat silly to me. Of course, if you hide the thing, you know where it was. But it was all a grand game of pretend, I guess. Selena blinked at Janice. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but no words came out. What else was there to ask? Selena knew what she needed to know. Wiping her suddenly moist eyes with a troubling hand, Selena stood. I have to get home and get some work done, she lied. If Janice thought it odd that Selena practically ran out of the house and leaped into the pickup, Janice kept her reaction hidden. She smiled and waved as Selena drove away. Selena managed a twitchy wave in return. She couldn't summon up a smile. Her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that they started to ache, Selena burned rubber as she accelerated away from Janice's home. She ignored the posted speed limit. Although her eyes were on the road, she wasn't really seeing it until her gaze flicked over an oncoming SUV, a very familiar SUV. It was Cade. Selena looked straight ahead as she passed her husband. Had he seen her? Cade often got tunnel vision when he drove. Maybe he hadn't noticed the pickup, the bright red pickup. Selena glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV turned off, heading toward Janice's house. So what if Cade did see her? Maybe Selena was overreacting. Maybe she only thought she knew what was going on. And again, maybe she was leaping to logical conclusions that weren't logical at all. A ripple of something that felt like static electricity skittered down Selena's spine. Was it groundless anxiety, or was it thoroughly justified fear? Selena didn't know. All she knew was that she wanted to get away. Would she be fleeing from Lally, or from Cade? Or would she be fleeing from herself? It didn't matter. She was fleeing. Back in the farmhouse, Selena ran down the hall to the attic door, hesitating for only a couple of seconds. She flung open the door and trotted up the steps. At the top of the stairs, she quickly pulled a string to turn on the bare bulb. She looked around. The attic looked the same as it had the last several times that she checked it. Rushing across the open space, Selena grabbed 2 suitcases, the 2 largest. She pulled them across the attic. Their rubber wheels made scuffling noises against the buckled floorboards. Selena shoved the suitcases out of the attic onto the landing at the top of the stairs. Then she dragged the cases down the stairs. The skr, thump, skr, thump, skr, thump of their progress down the stairs made her cringe. At the bottom of the stairs, Selena moved the suitcases into the hall. She turned and closed the door behind her. She pulled the suitcases down the hall to the bedroom. Selena hadn't allowed herself to sense anything since she left Janice's house. She didn't think she could function if she let herself feel. When Selena lifted the suitcases onto the bed, though, her emotions demanded that she acknowledge them. She started crying. Stop it. Selena chastised herself. She wiped her eyes. She needed to focus. Selena rushed to the bureau and began pulling out her clothes. She tried to think clearly enough to grab only what she really needed. Other than packing and getting out of the house, she had no clear plan in mind. How could she? She wasn't reasoning, she was reacting. Selena finished with the bureau and started toward the closet. She was reaching for the door handle when she heard a thud downstairs. She froze. Holding her breath, Selena listened. She just started to breathe again when the thud was followed by a rustling sound. Selena turned and stared at the open bedroom door. Why hadn't she closed it? Abandoning her packing job, Selena crossed the open doorway. She looked down the hallway. It was empty. A single tap came from the stairs leading down to the first floor. Selena glanced back into the bedroom. Should she ignore the sounds and just keep packing? No way. If she wasn't here alone, she wanted to know about it. Selena tiptoed toward the stairs. She craned her neck to examine the whole flight. It was empty. Selena looked around. Okay, she'd do this systematically. Starting with the empty bedroom, Selena began her search. She first opened the closet and checked the trunk. It was empty, of course. Selena moved on to the bedroom they intended to turn into a spare room. It now had a bed, but the bed wasn't made up, and they hadn't added any other furniture. Selena got down on her knees and looked under the bed. Nothing. She stood and went to the closet. Selena had put the lesser used part of her wardrobe in this closet. She had too many clothes. She knew that. But she loved clothes. She put most of her vintage finds in this closet. Throwing open the closet door, she pushed back the long dresses and skirts. Nothing was behind them. The only thing on the floor of the closet was a couple dozen pairs of Selena's shoes, the ones that didn't fit in the master bedroom closet. On the shelf above the clothes, hat boxes containing the hats she rarely wore were stacked almost to the ceiling. Selena left the guest room. She opened the linen closet. It too held only what it was supposed to hold. Stacks of towels and sheets and bales of toilet paper and paper towels filled the closet's shelves. Selena closed the closet door. Selena already knew nothing was in her bedroom. She'd just been in there. She'd also just checked the attic. She had to go downstairs. Selena walked slowly to the top of the staircase. She listened. 2 clicks and a rattle came from the direction of the kitchen. Selena steeled herself. She stepped as lightly as she could onto the first step. Doing her best to avoid the creaky spots in the stairs, Selena crept down to the living room. There, she paused. A faint scratching sound came from the dining room. She headed that way. They had yet to fill the hutch that had come with the cherry dining room set. Its upper display cabinets were empty. Selena hurried over to the hutch and opened its bottom cabinets. They were empty too. The dining room was separated from the kitchen by pocket doors. They were tucked back so the doorway was open. Selena stepped through it and surveyed the kitchen. It was deserted. She crossed to the pantry. She opened the door and looked at the shelves full of canned and boxed foods, baking supplies, and small kitchen appliances. She felt her tears trying to return. She had so much fun organizing the pantry, but that had been before. A rasp came from the living room. It sounded like something was being dragged. Selena grabbed a rolling pin from the nearest pantry shelf. She ran into the living room, the rolling pin cocked over her shoulder. The living room was empty. Selena lowered the rolling pin. Now what? She searched the whole house. She looked up the stairs, thinking about her abandoned packing job. Was she overreacting? Selena walked over to the sofa and sat down. She had laid the rolling pin on the seat next to her. She leaned against the soft sofa back and picked up a taupe and cream striped throw pillow. She hugged the pillow. Was she just being paranoid? Was she about to blow up her marriage? Her very new marriage? For no good reason? Selena remembered her brother's wedding day advice. Don't screw it up. Was she screwing it up? Something rustled behind the sofa. Selena scrabbled for the rolling pin as she started to turn. Before Selena could get a grip on the rolling pin or see what was behind her, a hand clamped over her mouth. Selena's heart kicked into overdrive. She tried to scream, but the hand stifled the noise. Selena flailed for the rolling pin. The back of her hand knocked against it, and it rolled off the sofa. It hit the rug with a thunk. Shh, Kate said. Selena twisted her neck so she could look up and behind her. Kate was leaning over the back of the sofa. Had he been hiding behind there? Why? What was he doing? Had it been him making all those sounds? Again. Why? Selena goggled at her husband. Kate put his fingers over his lips. His gaze, intense, almost deranged, darted all around the room. Selena stared into the face of the man she loved for over 2 years. It was a face she thought she knew better than her own. And the man was someone she knew that well too. She planned to spend her life with him. He was like an extension of her. Now she barely recognized him. Yes, Kate still had the thick black hair and brows, the green eyes, the sculpted cheeks shadowed by his black whiskers as usual. He still had the wide mouth and the even white teeth. But all those features now looked distorted somehow. They looked like they'd been infected, tinged by something dark and menacing. Selena tried to wrench her head away from Kate's hand. He pulled her tighter against the back of the sofa, turning her head so she couldn't see him anymore. She felt the pressure of his head against the top of hers. "If you upset Lally," Kate whispered, "you'll end up in the trunk next." Selena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. She struggled to suck in air through her nose, which was partially covered by Kate's hot, hard palm. Kate's breath was sour. He'd never had breath like that before. She smelled his morning breath and his garlic breath and his peanut butter breath, but this was acrid, as if he was exhaling whatever poison he kept hidden inside for many, many years. "Promise you won't scream if I take my hand away," Cade whispered. His whisper was so quiet that Selena could barely make out the words. His warm, repulsive breath puffed into her ear. Selena nodded several times. Why bother screaming? No one but Cade would hear her anyway. Promise? Cade whispered. Selena nodded again. Cade took his hand away from Selena's mouth. She turned and opened her mouth. Cade made another shushing gesture. He leaned even closer to her. Don't speak. You really don't want to upset Lally, Cade whispered. Selena used every ounce of willpower she had to keep her expression blank. She didn't move or make a sound. Cade hurried around the sofa and sat down next to Selena. She didn't look at him again. She couldn't. She stared straight ahead, and she stayed silent. Inside her mind, however, Selena was screaming her head off. She was tearing toward the door. She was coming to grips with the only logical conclusion presented by the facts. Her husband was insane. Selena looked toward the entryway. Could she make it to the front door before Cade caught her? She glanced at Cade. He cocked his head at her. Then he, too, looked toward the front door. He shook his head, slowly, once. He returned to scanning the room. Cade was sitting close enough to Selena that she could feel the heat of his muscled thigh against hers. She was so familiar with the solid feel of him, but now the pressure against her own leg felt foreign, invasive. You killed Daniel, didn't you? Selena whispered. She didn't know she was going to ask the question until it was out of her mouth. She hadn't let herself consciously think about the conclusion she reached when Janice had told her about the boy who had died. But clearly, Selena had known. Why else has she raced home to pack? Why else has she planned to leave the man she loved? Cade turned to stare at her. He shook his head. No, he whispered. He shook his head again. It was Lally. He turned and looked behind them. He craned his neck to look up the stairs. He shook his head a third time. The game is only for two. Prickles of terror cascaded through Selena's nervous system. Her throat closed, and she fought to breathe. Somehow, though, she was able to keep her expression tranquil. Selena dropped her gaze, looking for the rolling pin. Her shoulders slumped. The rolling pin had spun over the rug when it hit. It was now under the coffee table. Selena would never be able to reach it before Cade reacted. Turning toward Cade, Selena tried to look loving and concerned. Knowing what Lally did must have been terrible for you, she whispered. Cade looked at Selena as if he had no idea what she was talking about. She tamped down her revulsion and touched Cade's forearm. Cade, honey, if Lally's in here, we need to leave. Why don't we leave? Cade frowned. He turned and looked toward the front door. He shook his head. Selena didn't think. She just acted. Leaping off the sofa, Selena lunged for the brass lamp on the nearest end table. She yanked its cord free of the plug set in the floor. Cade started to stand and reach for Selena, but before he could, she gripped the lamp by its neck, crunching its drum shade. Then she swung the lamp like a baseball bat. She bashed its base against the side of Cade's head. Cade staggered back, then fell into the coffee table. He hit his temple on the table, and he was limp when he slumped to the floor. Selena didn't wait to see if Cade would move. She dropped the lamp and took off. Because Cade's body blocked Selena's path through the front door, she started toward the kitchen. She hadn't taken 2 steps though when she saw a hint of white out of the corner of her eye. Selena whipped her gaze toward it. As she did, Cade moaned and shifted. Selena lost her ability to reason. She turned and galloped up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, Selena realized she'd been an idiot. She should have tried to make it to the back door. Now though, she was on the 2nd floor. Up here, she had no way out of the house unless she wanted to leap from a 2nd floor window. She glanced back down the stairs. She heard Cade groan again. No, she couldn't risk going down there again. She looked down the hall. Where could she hide? A scuffling sound came from the living room. Selena ran down the hall. When she reached the guest bedroom door, she dashed into the room. She charged toward the closet, flung it open, and dove into the veil of her vintage clothes. She turned and pulled the closet door closed. It might not have been the best hiding place in the world, but the familiarity of Selena's things gave her comfort. She could draw on that comfort to help her think about her next step. Right now, she didn't know what to do next. She knew she couldn't hide in here forever, of course. The house wasn't that big. If Cade searched for her, he'd eventually find her. Maybe before then, though, she'd come up with a plan. Selena crouched behind the old dresses. Her breathing was so loud in the cramped darkness that it sounded like she was sharing the space with a pack of panting dogs. Selena gulped air for several seconds. She had to quiet down. She couldn't listen for Cade if all she could hear were her own billowing inhalations. Selena pulled herself into a tight little ball. She stared into the darkness pressing in around her. Although a trickle of light reached into the closet from under the door, it was only enough to give the clothes that shielded Selena a ghostly presence. Selena stared at the dim floating shapes and tried to steady her breathing. Selena was starting to get control of herself when the clothing draped around her swished. And then a whisper came out of the darkness. The whisper's message was short, but it was filled with meaning. "Hi." Selena screamed louder than she'd ever screamed in her life. Cade's consciousness swam in blackness. His thoughts were blanketed by the murk. Through this mental nothingness, however, sound reached him. He heard the echo of piercing screams. Then the curtain of oblivion muffled his hearing too. He was aware of nothing at all. Cade lifted his head. He groaned. It felt like a construction crew was pounding nails inside his skull. Putting a hand to his head, Cade winced. He felt a knot near his temple. Trying to sit up, Cade blinked to focus. The room spun. He was suddenly nauseous. He stopped moving and just sat, his back to the sofa. Cade tried to find a coherent thought. His mind felt sluggish, mushy. What was he doing on the floor? Cade tried to remember. Selena. Cade struggled to his feet. The room spun again, but he managed to stay upright. How long had he been out? He looked at his watch. Too long. The fog in his brain clearly erupted. "Selena?" Cade called out. Cade's chest constricted. He tore out of the living room. Racing through the dining room, Cade burst into the kitchen. He sprinted toward the pantry and flugged the door open. It was empty. Barreling out of the kitchen, Cade hurried down the hall toward Selena's office. He looked into the room. When he didn't see her, he ran to the half bath. She wasn't there either. Cade returned to the living room. He checked the coat closet. He found nothing but coats and boots. Cade pelted toward the stairs. He took the steps 2 at a time and was in the upstairs hallway in seconds. He rushed down the hall, throwing open doors as he went. He looked into the bathroom and his bedroom. He checked the master closet. Cade dashed back into the hallway. He started toward the guest room. Then he stopped. "No," he whispered. Cade turned and looked toward the closed door of the third bedroom. The door was just a door, but it suddenly seemed to pulse in a rhythm that matched Cade's rapid heart rate. Cade took a step toward the door. He wavered and steadied himself. He took another step. Finally, he forced himself to move normally again. He ran to the door. Cade's hand slipped off the knob when he tried to grasp it. His palms were sweating. He wiped them on his khakis and grabbed the knob again. He turned it. Cade charged into the empty room, not bothering to look around. Cade sped directly to the closet, throwing the door open. He tossed aside the blankets piled on the trunk. Cade dropped to his knees in front of it. Cade gripped the trunk's lid. Taking a deep breath, Cade opened the trunk. "No!" Cade cried out. Cade felt his fear contort in horror. Tears filled his eyes. He clapped a hand over his mouth so he couldn't be sick. He wanted to look away from the grisly contents of the trunk, but he couldn't. As he continued to stare into the trunk, Cade's shoulders convulsed. His chest heaved. Finally, he couldn't look any longer. He fell back. He dropped his head into his hands. Cade's head whipped up though, when a whisper came from above the trunk. It came from the empty shelf above the hanging rod in the closet. The whisper contained 5 familiar words. "The game is only for 2. The hissed words drifted down to Cade like the spray of a toxic mist. They engulfed him, and then they left him in silence. Cade reached the top of the staircase leading to the attic in his new house. He set down the stack of 3 boxes he lugged up the stairs. He looked across the attic at his beautiful fiancée. How could he have gotten so lucky? He'd hit the jackpot again. Debbie was gorgeous, blonde, blue-eyed, petite, and as sweet as she was stunning. Debbie was any man's dream, and for Cade, she was a reality. "Hey babe," Debbie said. "This is the coolest, isn't it? I've never had an attic before." Cade smiled. He loved Debbie's enthusiasm for life. Above them, rain pattered on the attic roof. The gentle tapping was soothing. So was the dark, cloudy sky that hung low over the house like a gray shawl. Cade and Debbie were moving into their new home, a big old Victorian on the outskirts of the city. They'd gotten the house for a song because it needed a lot of work. But Cade didn't mind. He liked the fixer-upper. Cade walked over to Debbie and wrapped his arms around her slight shoulders. "Yes, it's the coolest. Like you." Debbie laughed. She tilted her head back and kissed the dimple on Cade's chin. Stepping out of his embrace, she looked around the room. "I can't wait to finish this attic," Debbie said. "It will make an incredible art studio." She crossed to the big octagonal window at the east end of the attic. She She threw her arms out and then spun in a circle. When the sun's out, this window is going to let in some amazing light. An incredible art studio for an incredible artist, Cade said. Debbie laughed. She returned to Cade. You're the one who's incredible. Head programmer for the biggest tech company in the state. Hard to beat that. Cade gave Debbie an aw shucks look, but he didn't disagree. His new job was going to be great. He still couldn't believe he'd landed it. He couldn't wait to get started. He had to move away from his mom to take the job, but she hadn't been upset about that. Janice had assured him she'd be fine. It was sweet of you to move back to be close to me, sweetie, she said, and I loved having you nearby. But now I think we need to move on, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Debbie stepped away from Cade and started shifting boxes around. She set one box on top of a stack of 2. Then she cocked her head and looked behind the stack. Hey, I've never seen this trunk before, Debbie said. What's in this old thing? Cade crossed to Debbie and put his arm around her narrow waist. Oh, he said. It's just some childhood baggage. Cade steered Debbie toward the attic door. I'm ready for a bake, babe, aren't you? Let's go down and have some of that lemonade the new neighbor left for us. What was her name? Something old-fashioned. Debbie smiled. Winifred. That's it, Cade said. Cade ushered Debbie out of the attic and turned back to flip off the light. Hesitating, half listening to Debbie chatter about an aunt who had the old-fashioned name of Octavia, Cade looked at the trunk. The battered old chest seemed to peer back at Cade as he gazed at it. Cade turned off the light. He closed the attic door. Thunder rumbled as the skies darkened even more. The attic was swathed in somber shadows. Nothing but blackness could be seen in the vast space, until 2 small pinpoints of light peeked up over the top of the old trunk. The end.
Take what's left, spin it in the air, living for a reason they don't have here. They don't